All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. We have a pretty open slate as usual. We can hear about the SCA. We can clean up some threads and also just see what people we could look at over education and also or go any other angle that people think. So does anybody just want to begin with something or seed something that we can cover?
No, I'll just make a statement that I'm ready to get my hands dirty if there's something that needs doing, so you can keep that in the back of your mind.
Okay. Rob, do you want to catch us up on what's happening over there? Maybe with what dirt needs to be moved?
Um, well, actually, I'll start with SCA aspects by referring back to some conversation we had 2 weeks ago in our last meeting. I think we had a lot of conversations. I can't quite remember what triggered this. I think it might have been around general systems ideas and moving the science and the theory and the ISSS forward. I'm not quite sure. But I think, Daniel, you said that you hope that SCA would lead the way, the Systems Community Alliance work that we've been talking about during the meetings. And I didn't have time to respond back because we had such a full meeting last time. But I think in my very first presentation, I didn't see SCA as a leading body in the field. Its emphasis, certainly initially, is on providing infrastructure to allow different bodies within the community or different people even to develop and move forward the systems community. So I did want to say that at the time, so I'm just saying it now. SCA sees itself as an enabler for people who want to do work, and I wanted to turn the question around and say, how can SCA support people's work? And that offer is out there. So, for example, for the ISSS, provided all the archive listings, but I'm happy to work with the archivist in the ISSS if there is one. And I'm happy to network with other initiatives that might help the archiving initiatives within the ISSS. But it's definitely one of partnership or working with someone to take the lead rather than leading the way. So does that make sense, Daniel, for you and tie in with your understanding?
Yes, it definitely does. If I said that, I mean, it may have been in reference to the curation of the relevant texts in terms of what is provided. And I see curating, archiving, presenting, enabling as leading the way, even if it's not necessarily the public, it's part of the movement onwards, even if it's not necessarily like on the author list of some synthesis paper, but surely it should be acknowledged. And I think this, although the discussion some time ago was potentially language modeling based, I mean, what are the paradigms for interacting with the corpus? Search and retrievals of specific information. And then now on the table is kind of this secondary mode based upon text processing and representation. So while the second case captured a lot of people's interest, there's also this key question of what the system science researchers need to make the best contributions. So, I mean, what are the best enabling infrastructure?
Definitely. So the question is thrown back to the panel and to the wider audience is, what help do you need, or what infrastructure would you like to enable you to help move the community forward? I'll give one example. I think we touched on this last meeting, but on and off, I think, Tom, you have talked about a list of organizations. I know you've got a list of organizations in your data schema and your data. But when the SCA website does launch, it will have an updated version of the ISSS archive listings, but also it will release, I'm planning to release a register of organizations and people eventually, but organizations within the systems community. And this is not only a list of current ones, but also a list of past ones, because that then connects to all the valuable information historically that's out there in conferences, in historic conferences in cybernetics and in systems and in complexity sciences, self-organization conferences in the 60s, and people's archival work. So hopefully, Tom, that might be of interest or tie in with your lists and work as well.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it would. And I'm willing to contribute any data that I have, to this larger effort if it's worthwhile.
Excellent. We need to plug in all the people who are working within the community on systems, repositories, and knowledge, and connect them all up somehow in an accessible way. I think that's it really for the SCA. I'm not going to make any promises about when the website's released, because I've been promising it for the last several months, but it is getting closer.
Cool. Here I've just simply used the language model for reorganization of the notes that we had on this topic.
I think I will mention one other thing. Some of an email was sent out by a member, Jamie Rose, to Rulin, who then about asking for an advert to be put in the newsletter on a monthly basis. And she redirected it to Michelle, who I understand has taken over the newsletter now. And it was an advert saying, if anybody has any old systems books, then please contact him because he'd like to take them on. And that's great. But I think his message seemed to suggest that no one was doing anything. And so I know that people like Peter Tuddenham and other, had a group who have been digitizing a lot of the archives. And obviously, Jamie doesn't seem to have picked up on the list of the SCA list of ISSS content. And I'm not sure Rulin or Michelle or the board have a sort of an integrated response to say, oh yes, there are all these things going on. So that's something to be applauded. We do need to save this data, but that just to bring to this group's attention that that might appear in the newsletter in the future. I don't know where it's gone or where it's going.
Does anyone have any comments on this SCA question? I mean, about maybe even specifically, how can ISSS archives be used for system science? Not necessarily zooming out to the whole alliance.
Just one comment that it just while I was listening, I started thinking about collaboration. So the archive is just stored data, and someone might get some of it out, take it, access it, and do something with it. But I kind of like the idea of a collaborative space where someone poses a question and people share accessing the database and adding their own comments and building knowledge. So it'd be a shame to just have a library. It feels like there's a collaboration element. I know that was discussed early on, but it hasn't been discussed lately. For instance, I came back with, I think, a fairly deep question from the conference that just ended, and I couldn't answer it alone. I'm not sure that that topic would actually be in the database, but it just makes me think that there are other questions that, if we put a little infrastructure together to allow collaboration and sort of synthesizing, could be interesting. I haven't thought this all the way through, just giving a reaction.
Also, if anyone has any, oh yeah, go ahead. Any other updates about the conference, which I don't think we've really heard about.
But good, yes, good point about collaboration. That's a key step forward for our community in the future. Many ways to collaborate, maybe, but so definitely something to keep on an agenda somewhere. Sorry. Yeah.
Anyone here go to the conference?
Peter went. I was there, just taking it all in. I did give this group a plug in one of the plenaries where Gary was talking about his he was doing a talk, and I mentioned this group that I was the most junior member, but I was interested in hearing if anyone had any comments on what we might do. And I asked Gary also, about what strategy he would think to use for putting order to the data, and sort of talked about, bottom up, top down, starting with some topic and building outwards. And, he kind of said that actually thinking about things from a top down structural point of view, meaning we have some sort of ontology that we've decided is the way I interpret that, to push that down at the same time as your strategy, Daniel, of like reading everything and getting some sort of snapshot summaries or linguistic chains or whatever the right language is, and building something up from that. That felt like worth thinking about. Will just a bottom up approach give us the full context we want, or do we need to do some direction? But I'm not saying I know the answer to that, but I at least raised that as a question, as to that strategy.
I'm going to be meeting with Gary sometime. I'm not sure when, in the next month or so. And I'll try to push along, make sure that his radar screen is seeing this as an incoming president or president-elect. He has got some, aside from the work that he'd already started, he's got some ideas, I think, for how he wants to push agendas in the future. And I'd like to make sure this is on his radar screen. Maybe even get him to join us from time to time.
Right. And actually the context was he was talking about, he's done a lot of work to synthesize and unify system sciences ideas. So and that's what he was talking about, and that was the context of asking him questions. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yes. How can we use the kind of two-stroke alternation of knowledge engineering and education? Is is research fit in one of those, or do we also rotate into a research mode or space? Possibly knowledge engineering as more of the enabling system, modifying education to education and research, or education using knowledge engineering could be the enabling education for people like Shingai and George to then do whatever it is they need to do. Yeah, anyone can go for it.
I was going to say, yeah, both sound possible, but I suppose bring him on board and see where he sees his visions fitting in with the group.
Gary?
Rob, are you referring to Gary Smith?
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Okay.
I thought that's who we were talking about.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. Sorry.
On the collaboration, I mean, what are people thinking about, or what is the requirement or vision for what this is? Do people imagine ISSS using some system or process that they already know of? Or what is this here?
You know, I think I brought this up some time ago, but it would be interesting to know among the membership who is doing research, or what people are doing research in, whether it be for system science or theory or practice, and of those who are interested or have used archival material already available, so that we could get some idea of who the audience for that body of work would be in the future, or could be in the future, at least within the ISSS. And here's my sense. I have not run into anybody who really relates that they are doing current research. There's an awful lot of referencing to the historical frameworks that we all know about, but I don't know of anybody who's actually pursuing some sort of a research agenda or research structure. There might be in the practitioner community, like the action research folks. I'm just not sure who or what they might be doing.
I'm doing active, just, I'm doing active research. It's mainly around applications and heuristics, and exporting ideas from system science into my own profession, but then, hopefully I'll go further than that later.
Are you using any of the archival material that ISSS has?
Not yet, but I now have, from coming from that conference, a few questions that are growing in me.
I'm curious what to tune into when to answer your question, George, about people doing research. I mean, what Chris has just described, almost like he's investigating and then modifying his work practices to bring in new ideas or to try new ideas. But in terms of research, in terms of adding to a body of knowledge or having published papers, is that what you would be trying to tune into in terms of sort of like a modular bit of work that, and people can then sort of review and evaluate.
Yeah, I basically, so I'm just not that familiar with what's going on in the practitioner arena. I know I tapped into the INCASI System Science Working Group for a while, and then it became, I hate to say this, it became fairly clear to me that they weren't really pursuing any kind of research for a theoretical framework or for really coming to grips with what does it mean to have system science. They like to talk about it a lot, but I didn't see anything, coming from that.
Sure.
Maybe my blindness, but still, you'd think that there'd be some visibility given to these things. I mean, the work, going back to Gary Smith and his work, he's trying to really kind of come to grips with all the various things that are out there and how do they fit into some sort of a model that he's used to working with in chemistry, the periodic table. And he wants to try to find some structure in which you can start fitting these things into slots and whatnot. I don't know how successful that's going to be. I looked at some of that work and I wasn't terribly convinced that that was going to get anywhere, at least not anywhere very soon. But then I know of or heard of some folks who are in the practitioner area who have been doing active field studies or research on methodologies, things like that. And I would be curious to know if any of them, I haven't read any of the, for example, the conference papers in any of these areas. So I don't know if they're actually doing that or these are just things that come up in conversation or what. So I'd be kind of interested to know if in fact people, and the fundamental point is, are the members of the ISSS actually using this, this body of work that we've got in some semi-accessible archival fashion? Are they actually using that? And so there's the education issue. Are people using these archives to become more educated in the subject? And then there's the research side of it, which says, are people using the archival material to support or at least do background stuff for their particular research questions? And maybe Royland has some insights into that, since she does the research in the methodological arena.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of my own research in systems, certainly topics are used in recent publications that would exist in the archives, but I have to say, even I didn't think to specifically look there. However, if it were more of a meta-analysis, or if I were making a more explicit system science relationship than I would have, but being able to look even just by keyword to find out the history of an idea, and then having those citations just available to bring them to resurface them and to provide more anchoring and weaving in the literature, instead of just the continual drift of just whatever it is today, whatever language and associations it is today. But I don't think, and yeah. I mean, does our front end support that as is? If somebody were like, yeah, I'm ready to look up a keyword, obviously this is just a mock-up.
maybe we found my get my hands dirty
Would you
project.
like to work on this component?
Yeah, I can start to see what I could make of what's there already. That's appealing to me.
Okay, yeah, I'll put it in the chat again, but and then I will in is BT Internet the best email address for you, Chris? Or
Unmute. Yes.
okay, all right. So I'll just
So, Chris, in terms of getting your hands dirty, are you sort of heading towards ways of utilizing the archives or making them accessible rather than, utilizing them for personal research? But or which direction is you sort of leaning towards?
So I can't put words to them, but intuitively I've got a few areas I'm interested in. So if I just have a go at seeing what I can do and keep some record of my journey, and suggest, yeah, and just say, what's easy, what's difficult, what might have been useful, just as a baby step. That's what I have in mind.
Okay, just to sum up quickly in terms of the digitization of the archives, Peter and Jennifer and others have been digitizing the yearbooks, the general systems bulletins, the new list letters are largely on there somewhere. They're not in necessarily machine readable format. They might be just PDF or not integrated together. But you have the source data and you have maybe an index through the SCA spreadsheet that's been supplied. And then, so that's one comment. And then the other one is like the similar situation that comes to mind is the Bertalanffy Center in Austria, where they rescued all the combined works of Bertalanffy, I think. And then they created a whole research institute about mining that for insights in his life stories. And there's lots of Bertalanffy scholars out there who use that archive material in that way, in that particular way. So just a couple of ideas or thoughts there.
cool. Yeah, just to review this interface document, journeys which can be developed, it's just describing a few different use cases with their links. The attachments of the source files are given, and this is a naming system that Rob uses, so they're distribution based releases. Collections are recurrent kinds of material. Conferences is only the type of conferences. These are just filtered views. Then General Systems Yearbook and the bulletin. And then within the yearbook, maybe I'll just simplify a little bit. Within the yearbook, that's where we have fuller information. And here is where there's the tables just about the yearbook with more detail. They can be sorted and viewed differently in Coda if you have thoughts or you want to play around with how it can be visualized, the detail view, and just like different renderable graphics that we can make. And again, this is all just a schema just to try to give different windows on the data. But we could imagine that what it would look like to have complete coverage of the ISSS archive would be the collections have already been enumerated. And so to have full coverage, at least at the bibliographic level, and at the full text where possible, that is the large but finite archival task. Then there's open-endedness in terms of usability and use cases. But I think as Rob has surveyed it, it's very clear what it would be to be done.
And my hope is to do that for other organizations. So I think Peter said that he'd managed to become a sort of a curator or archiver for the ASC, the American Society for Cybernetics. And he was hoping to archive or get together their collections of systems material. So I'm hoping to do a list similarly for ASC using the same data model as Daniel's just described is presented in the ISSS data. And then, you know, a longer term goal is that get the archivists from all the different organizations like ASC, ISSS, the people working on these to share how they're accessing and leveraging their archives. So that's a future hope. But then, you know, that's heading towards your network of people who are similarly trying to struggle with these questions. You know, you're not working on it alone, hopefully. There's other people out there who have archives that they want to leverage it and move forward with new ideas and new technology.
There's the overall search. This is just looking for all words in the document, and if whether they're in a table or not. And then we could talk more about different CODA functions or anything like that. We could use different language processing in CODA. Use the AI. Summarize the description. Just that it's using GPT 3.5 as far as we know. But you know, there may be fun specifics. I'll delete that though.
Or so what might be useful for me is to just look at the recording of this and poke around some of the places you've just poked around, so I really know what's what. Then you've given examples of how to use different applications, but that might be really useful in itself, would be to have a, you know, be able to follow along to some of your own dives. I mean, you've already done some, but maybe the question is, can you do a example with the thought that people would be able to follow along and learn a little bit by doing?
Yeah, I'd love to see journeys be that way. Even if it were a multi-step journey, it's like, if you know you want to get to a filtered view of all the authors, you know, if a word cloud of all the titles of this, here we already made that for you. It's just a one-stop train ride. Or here's like a few steps that you'll have to take. But being able to share what actions are possible, because in terms of the research users, I mean, there's going to be people who are like, oh, I've been just super excited and waiting to search ISSS archives by keyword, and it'll just drop in their lap, and the demand will already be there for them. But then the other side is like this sort of like Steve Jobs angle, like people will not know what they want to do with it until we can clearly convey what it can do. And then if that can be provided, then that will like build the demand because the system can provide it.
So one use case story that I can sort of try and formulate and share. When I was compiling the list of all the articles in each of the 32 yearbooks, which is probably the highest quality content that the ISSS has. And a lot of them are not only from ISSS members. I think the early yearbooks they cultivated from other authors to be exemplars of the field, the growing field. But I marked all the ones that I was interested in my area, you know, around general systems theory. And I've got them highlighted to go back and read the source material. which at the moment would involve finding the particular yearbook on the ISSS members library area, digitized, and then finding the article and then just reading it. So that's one use case that I'm, have found value of, because there seem to be some very, very interesting articles on general systems theory in those yearbooks.
In the full texts that you were able to access. Yeah.
Yes.
And the distribution files contain information on the it won't show in the browser, but like on the licensing where it's known. But for
yes, they do. They're correct.
And what is the status for ISSS published materials? Or what does it what does it range from?
It ranges from it's owned by the author, or it's in a sort of a preprint version, all the way up to this has been reprinted with permission of the publisher and the author in this volume. So at the moment, it's behind the members' paywall, and there is that question. I think the spreadsheet I supplied does try and give some indication of who owns the copyright in one of the columns. I don't know if the PDFs are high quality or have been OCR'd to provide quality text, searchable text. I think that's another step in this process.
Yes. Anyone else have any just thoughts or questions on this kind of topic? Shaping the interface for the ISSS archives, possible use directions for the archives. We can look to having some people rejoin when Peter's back in the game, or whomever. We can sort of return to a few other topics, but mainly we just are working with Rob's outputs and trying to stimulate interest in ISSS members about the history of the organization, the contributions, and then trying to transmute that into people who want to find different roles in editing and improving and curating it from the fresh off the press spreadsheets, which will become more copious and comprehensive, and then just understanding what happens once we get that spreadsheet delivery, and also having a stable, and then also what information can we send back so that the next released version, like, okay, we contacted these, or these authors are no longer here, or we did this on these citations, or here's the stable URL reference for these rows. Maybe then we could send a column back to Rob, so that it's not just like dropping a fresh file in. We're kind of just like alternating, incrementing, but we can explore that. We can look over at education, just because I know not everyone goes to that, but look and see a little bit about what Shingai and George have been exploring, or is there anything else here that people want to look at?
Sounds good.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So over in education, I'll put the link in the chat. Well, there's kind of a more development and oriented, and then one kind of broader considerations. We always discuss Shingai's posts in his Systems Explorers work, which cover the principles of systems that George et al. Have laid out in books. And then recently we've been having the conversation of systemism as ideology and kind of what this looks like, what that is. But more on the development side. People are always talking about these kinds of upper ontologies, principles of systems, and George is always like slamming his textbook on the table. To be totally fair. So we several months ago read Shingai and I, maybe some other people read too, chapters 3 and 4, which provide the systems ontology. And then this developed towards us kind of picking up where George's schema or just sort of draft directive was left in the book, which never presents itself as like the singular, the absolute approach. But across these targeted chapters, which do actually connect back to knowledge engineering, knowledge systems as system of interest. Here's the knowledge base. So I mean, in some way, the knowledge engineering is more narrowly focused on this component too. But thinking a little bit more broadly about this entire systems analysis apparatus and process in terms of the multiple components. You know, here's the ant in the petri dish, and here's the entire apparatus. So we are working to distill specifications from the ontological, linguistic, structural aspects from these chapters from George's textbook. So that's kind of step one, is like distill out what these sections convey and develop a synthetic specification for this, starting with what we distilled out, but then Shingai and I will probably see other ways or connect to different tools that weren't mentioned in the book. Then we are Shingai is probably more familiar than I am, but we've both worked with CAD, which is a really powerful dynamical systems simulation suite, open source, and it's grounded in generalized dynamical systems and category theory. So with this synthetic specification from the textbook, we could then map into CAD and then work towards a kind of front and back end of what such a system could look like. So we'll see who and how joins the fun, but it's already been very cool to lay this out, and we can increment on it. It's a lot of fun work or affordances if anybody wants to be involved. That's funny, you can see Shingai in there now too. Yeah, anyone have any thoughts on this?
It looks interesting. I like it.
Those sessions were recorded, the education ones, weren't they?
Yes. They're in a separate playlist, but they're also...
I'm being called. I gotta go. Thank you very much.
Very well, Chris. Yeah, they are recorded. Yeah, that's fun. I mean, this is like the tool we know we need in a way. I often wonder how people manage to do so much, or at least say and charge so much without such an understanding or tool.
So it's kind of ironic, I guess. I've gotten quite a number of inputs from people outside of the ISSS who have been reviewing the book and making comments and stuff. And what I had actually hoped was that the community would sort of give me feedback, tell me, did I get this right or did I get this wrong or whatever? I mean, this is the normal discourse that you would expect to come from a community of people who have the same kind of interest. And actually got very, very, very little from ISSS members. Gary Smith he dabbled in it a little bit early on after it was first published. And then he just sort of got off in this other direction that he was trying to put together. And then more recently, he's come back and said, okay, I'm beginning to see where the value of this might lie. So, but the whole point is not, as Daniel said, it's not a claim that this is the end all be all. It's a claim that here's a model of the whole concept of a system understanding. What's wrong with it? Throw darts at it. Figure out if it's usable. What we're seeing now is a feasible way. If I were younger and was still in the education business and had PhD students, I'd be working on this as part of my research agenda to try to actually implement this thing. But now along comes CAD and ChatGPT and all these other tools that may make it feasible to be done in a fairly quick fashion. But I really had hoped to have more feedback from the community to proceed forward with it. But in the meantime, this group and Shanghai has particularly been very good at taking a look and actually seeing what's there and not just saying, oh yeah, it's systems, I know about that. That's the end of it.
Yeah, thank you, George. Lot to say on that, but I mean, one angle that is like capturing as people accelerate into systems is like where there's a lot of friction. That's like the kind of onboarding and inclusion question. But also that's like where there's the inertia to do work and the potential energy to do work is as people are like building into systems, usually earlier in their life, then they're going to have like more capacity to develop things, connect it to modern topics, share about it, have an authentic learning experience in the open. Whereas like looking back on a systems career, of course, it is also an essential role. But I think that what you've shared evidence is that people's lanes or their capacities may narrow in some way that leads to 100 tiny lineages of system science that aren't as integrated, because by the time each person has coalesced into their own understanding for whichever logistical, psychological reasons, it's not on the top of their to-do list to read your multi-100-page book and do the volunteer service of reviewing it and so on. Just one thought.
Just to be clear, which of your two books is being reviewed? Is it the principles one or the system science one?
The second one, system science.
The later one. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
2020. Yeah.
I haven't bought that one yet.
Well, I wish I could offer free copies, but unfortunately, my my contract says that I have to, if I want to send a copy, I got, what was it, 8 free ones initially from the publisher. And then, of course, I sent them to the people who actually did actually review and give me feedback. So I don't have any more of those. And it cost me almost as much as it would cost anybody else to purchase. I can, however, send PDFs of chapters. And if people are interested, my only problem with that is there's so much cross-referencing in the book. From the chapters are very integrated. And so if you read a chapter without, say, reading a previous chapter, it's going to refer back to, and it refers forward to, and then you just don't have those linkages. So that's the only problem with that.
Yeah.
And I'm still working my way through principles, but which one is the better one for us to concentrate on then, principles or the system science one?
Well, I'd say the system science one, because that's what we're talking about, methodological approach. We're talking about a theoretical framework and then a methodological approach to actually studying systems and developing a deep understanding of systems and so on.
Yeah,
So,
that's key. The methodological aspects are missing from, you know, all our current endeavors, I think, the rigor.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. Process-based. These are the chapters that were pulled out. Also, it could be fun to look through. That's so funny. Shinkai is joining. We'll let him in. But like to look at the citation networks, this kind of goes back to the citation analyses. Contact these authors and just say, cool that you cited George's book. What do you think about this? Anyways, how goes it, Shingai, in our last little bit? Do you want to share anything?
Good. I'm sorry. I completely lost track of time. I was working on the Coda page and just, yeah. Yeah, so I'm filling out chapter 4 on the Coda document for SysXML. And I was inspired by the work you did at Active Inference, Daniel, with like latex equations. So would love any assistance in let's see, is that the right? No, wrong one. The SysXML.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down, you'll see all the equations are there in latex. And I saw you did some really cool work with using artificial intelligence to explain the latex equations. So would love your help making that happen. And if anyone has input about missing content or how I can organize the information that makes it like really accessible, I would love that.
Here, put the LaTeX in plain text here. We can have a LaTeX render column as well.
Okay. Yep.
But then here, AI explain the equation in at LaTeX.
Okay.
And then put something here and then redo it if it needs to. And that will be all you need.
Wow.
Yeah, it's epic. Yeah, oh, it's huge. Coda's just pulling away.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's epic. All right. Any other thoughts or comments that people have? Cool. Well, hope to see people in future weeks. Just email education@ISSS if anything else happens. Otherwise, see you all next time.
Bye. Thanks, Daniel.
Bye. Thank you.